Good evening. This is so serious. It is an absolute honor to be here this evening and as a band to receive the John Steinbeck Award. To stand before you and join the illustrious list of former recipients, including many of our other heroes from Baez to the Boss, is for me at least the honor of my professional life so far. And it's my job to have a crack at telling you some of the story of our band and your bard. But first, some very English confessions. I am no scholar, nor was meant to be. I read what was put in front of me at high school and spent the rest of the time playing soccer. I am no college graduate. Ted's actually the only one of us with a real degree. Oh, it's not that real. He's a silent assassin. I am far less an expert than the vast majority in this room, including my bandmates, honestly. 3, I am a thief and have long adopted the policy that artists steal, and I'm cool with it. 5, I'm bad at maths. And this is the big reveal, I am an American citizen. I was born in California, no less. And that becomes relevant. But I'm here to explain what it is about John Steinbeck's writing that has led us here tonight, led us to adapt the way we think about the world, led us to adopt some of his values and examine his principles, and to recognize his influence over our artistic and social choices. America has always been romantic to me. The place of my birth, the backdrop for my favorite stories, the place I left behind but come back to again and again, the place I'm always an outsider but I'm always at home. I'd skipped Steinbeck's America by growing up in England and found myself immersed in it after school and felt I'd stumbled on a secret. Our favorite books always feel like they were written just for us and are often read in secret and passionate fervor. To quote Nelson Mandela, I would say that when I closed the grapes of wrath, I was a different man. Despite being born in the States, I grew up in a fairly harmless, comfortable, though not affluent part of southwest London. After high school, I'd spent some time living and working amongst a community of heroin addicts in Hong Kong. Ex-triad gang members and sex workers, people so noble and inclusive, but also so downtrodden and desperate, abused and taken advantage of by the powerful. Steinbeck's depictions of downtrodden communities in other times and places resonated particularly loudly in my mind at that time. Taking an unvarnished look at cruelty and injustice, I came to find essential to Steinbeck's vision, and it is precisely this which Ben and I discussed at length as we sat around his piano shortly afterwards and wrote our first song inspired by Mr. Steinbeck called Dust Bowl Dance. The commodification of people, the autocracy of the market and the anonymity of the state, the degradation of community, the dismissal of the local, and the devaluation of the rural, the rage that burns underneath injustice. We metabolized all these ideas and wanted to tell a story of the perseverance of the human spirit amidst the tragic. At the center of it all, there was that glittering instrument, the human soul. And that leads me to the first of 2 themes in Steinbeck's work that I want to recognize for their importance to us and then their effect on our life as a band. I'll speak for about 4 to 8 hours, if that's all right. No, I'll try to keep it brief. Number 1, loving our neighbor. Like Mr. Steinbeck, I grew up in the church with a faith background, something not a million miles from his Episcopalian upbringing. Somewhere at the core of it, I knew there was the central greatest commandment from Jesus himself, a commandment to love God and to love your neighbor. A commandment I'd thought to have taken fairly seriously, as I know Mr. Steinbeck did. And you see it throughout his writing, an awe of nature, of love, of creation, of the numinous power which C.S. Lewis was talking about in The Problem of Pain. But it was the practical, the focused, the human, the concrete, which grabbed Steinbeck and me as well. From East of Eden to Grapes of Wrath, Tortilla Flat to The Pearl, the notes change, but the melody remains the same. Our welfare simply is wrapped up in the welfare of the other, and we do not have a choice about it. Isolation and loneliness in communities is the death of them. A truly common life is something worth nurturing, and it demands attention and effort. That insight led me to a second, the importance of intentional listening. This seems to me something that John Steinbeck clearly found so crucial before he wrote or spoke, granting others the space to speak from the place that they're in, allowing others to narrate the world they inhabit without needing to put them in a box of your own making, resisting the noisiness of the world that flattens out our differences or explains them away. This is the work of patient observation, the practice of sustained attention. The quiet keenings of Kino in The Pearl, the muted musings of Lee in East of Eden. And I think it's particularly well exemplified in a passage in Travels with Charlie, when Steinbeck is in New Orleans, having witnessed a group of white women known as the cheerleaders hurling rehearsed and obscene abuse against African-American schoolchildren on their way into a newly integrated school in 1962. Afterwards, in a state of shock, I think, he is sitting with his dog Charlie by a riverbank when he comes across a neatly dressed local white man, well along in years with a Greco face and fine, wind-lifted white hair. He asks him to join him for a coffee, and they sit to talk. As Steinbeck asks about the atrocity he's just witnessed, he says this, "Can you see an end?" The man replies, "Oh, certainly an end. It's the means. It's the means. But you're from the north. This isn't your problem." "I guess it's everybody's problem," Steinbeck says. "It isn't local. Would you have another cup of coffee and talk to me about it? I don't have a position. I mean, I want to hear." This is the magic. His natural disposition is not to impose his own opinion, but to listen, whether he likes what he hears or not. And that, to me, is such a powerful and humble skill to acquire. Acquire it we must, because I don't think it comes naturally to many of us. It's humanizing and dignifying and important. So much of Steinbeck's work placed in central focus the daily life of what I'm sure politicians would refer to as ordinary working people, but had a particular passion for exhibiting the dignity and exploring the complex humanity of the poor and the destitute. People who didn't match up with the glossy image of mid-century American dreams, with which he tussled so grandly, nor the romance of the gun-toting wild Westerners which he dismissed so consistently. These were the farmers, the fishermen, the migrant workers, the indigenous pearl divers, the flawed heroes and breastfeeding, life-giving mothers. And so with these two tenets of our Steinbeck faith in hand, neighborliness and listening, it's also my job to try to explain the ways in which each has shaped our life as writers and as a band. You can imagine they cross over quite a bit. Firstly, try and be good neighbors. For us, by 2007, when we started the band, our physical neighborhood was more and more a transient concept. It was wherever we parked our bus at night, and so it has continued. For many of us, much of the time, we often feel closest to people on the other side of the world. But this being what it is, we've adopted a kind of both-and approach to neighborliness. You don't get to not know your octogenarian widow next-door neighbor's name just because you retweeted about the death toll among children in Gaza. And this is why we've been supporters of the ongoing work at Grenfell Tower in London. While we were recording close by, a high-rise tower block in the neighborhood in which we started the band and in which I still lived burned to the ground, killing 72 of our actual neighbors. I could see the tower burning from my apartment nearby and went down to volunteer like everyone in our community did. This brings me to the effect on us of this second theme, this intentional listening. It's a long and ongoing story which I won't do justice to here and now, but what became clear in the immediate aftermath of the Grenfell Tower tragedy is that there was an endemic problem of voicelessness in this part of our community, or rather, the voices of the marginalized were left unheard. Right on the doorstep of the famously wealthy Notting Hill, Grenfell Tower was occupied by residents all too often failed by both the market and the state. What became remarkably clear when the flames were out was the importance of listening. Everyone was running around trying to act, but not enough of us were just listening first. People started pouring forth their stories, and the more we listened, the more we simply had to stick around. The main thing I've learned is that listening isn't a passive exercise. It obviously brings with it responsibility, but to resist the urge to act without intentionally listening first seems to me to be the challenge. We then, amongst others, responded to a direct request from a group of survivors and bereaved to set up an organization to help, long-term, support the community affected by the tragedy, which is called the Grenfell Foundation and which is funded in part by the Gentlemen of the Road Fund. Meanwhile, back on the road, Travels with Charlie provides us with a handbook for touring life, not just in its recognition of the romance of a journey, but in its core principle of listening to local communities wherever you roam, and then celebrating the good that you've heard, the good in what you've heard, being challenged by the points of difference. This means we think of ourselves as visitors rather than tourists. A tourist comes to see the place, extracting whatever value they can as efficiently as possible. Not so with a visitor who arrives to meet and commune with the people of that place, often and ideally bearing gifts. So we took this to heart and we started putting on our own festivals in small towns, less frequented by touring bands. We called them stopovers intentionally rather than takeovers. We'd heard stories of bands coming through small towns and taking cuts of the gas station's profits. We wanted to do the opposite. We wanted to leave the places we'd been, having listened to the people in that community and having left it in some way better than we'd found it. We are immensely proud of this effort and take great joy in seeing a community find itself anew. A wonderful weekend can't solve everything, of course, but demonstration projects of what's possible can't hurt. We put on an event, listen to the community, and establish the conditions under which that community can receive the benefits of such a gathering for a long time to come. This has meant we've done our very best to listen to local communities. I don't think we're excellent at it yet, but we're trying. To the dreams they have for themselves and the pains they experience in every way that we can when we travel. And this I credit in some large part to Steinbeck. With my role as an ambassador for War Child UK and children in conflict in the US, I've been privileged enough to visit communities on multiple trips to Gaza and Jerusalem, Iraq and Jordan, and to the Central African Republic. By listening to the people of those places, we've borne witness to the work being done to support children in conflict, which the Gentlemen of the Road Fund now supports wholeheartedly. On my first trip to Jerusalem, I met a mother who had lost her son, who told me, "Please just listen. Don't try to fix anything while you're here like everyone does. Just listen. Because when you listen to my story, you bring dignity to my humanity." Those words stay with me wherever I go, because words are vital. Stories are vital. It is my honor this evening to recognize, amidst the power of words, the importance of John Steinbeck's words that led me there and now lead us here.